Today I'm coming to you from a new setup again with multiple angles. We got 1, we got 2, we got 3, and we got this here microphone, all to tell you what the absolute best and easiest way to start in real estate is to actually know what is the very first property I should start with. I gotta know, is it 10 units? Is it 4 units? Is it a house? Is it a condo? Where should I start? How do I start in real estate? Because golly, there's so much information out there, and I just want to hear it straight from somebody who's A, done it before, and B, encourages sharing transparent information to help you learn how to build wealth in real estate. And that is exactly what we're gonna do right now. Here it is, folks. This is gonna sound crazy and it's gonna blow your mind, possibly, unless you've watched my live streams before or you've watched my other content before. Let's first set some groundwork. Most people buy their first house between the age of 25 and 40. I happen to have bought my first house at 19, and that doesn't mean you can't buy your first house after 40 or before 25. That just happens to be statistically what the average is. Now keep in mind, only about 63% of Americans actually own the property they live in. And remember, the idea of buying your first property is not to buy your be-all end-all property. It is to start you on a career of investing in real estate. So the very first property you buy, and the one that I'm going to exemplify, is the property that makes the most sense for your portfolio for the long run, so that you can develop and start investing in real estate by starting first by making the first move of purchasing your own property and replacing the fact that you're simply paying off somebody else's mortgage by renting a property. Obviously, there are a lot of pitfalls, and we're gonna touch on some of the pitfalls right now. But I wanna get you started on how to invest in real estate. And this is exactly how to do it in terms of what property to buy and what to look for when you finally decide to buy that property. Now let's also set the stage that most folks start their real estate investing career with less than $30,000. Some people start with $15,000, some people start with $50,000, some people start with $5,000, and they have to partner to make it happen. But let's exemplify this so you can really just dive into this and get a feel for it. Understand though, when I give you exactly what it is you should do, you gotta hear out the pitfalls, the pros, the cons, and all of the other information, so make sure to stay tuned throughout the entire video. Here's exactly what you're going to do. The very first property you buy, in my complete opinion, when you're starting out in real estate and you don't know what repairs cost and you don't know how the deal works and you don't know how much money you need to put aside for the, oh no, the roof is leaking now, and you have no idea how to buy the correct units at the right price and at the right cap rate and gross rent multiplier and all this junk. Forget all of it. You're gonna start by doing this. You're going to buy a condo. This sounds crazy, I know, but hear out the reasons why. You're going to start with either a studio, a 1-bedroom, or ideally a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. Your ideal is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, although if you start with a studio or a 1-bedroom, that's okay, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, here are some very important rules that you should follow when you buy this condo. Number 1, it should not be a completely fixed up property. Ideally, you get a condo that needs a new kitchen, that needs to be painted, needs its carpet replaced, and needs new light fixtures. If you go in and you see that 90s ceiling fan with a thick layer of dust on it, we go like this, it's like, oh my gosh, it's flying everywhere now. That's the kind of property you want to buy, because that's the kind of property you're not going to overpay on. That's the property that is probably selling for less than the true market value of these condos, and it's probably selling at a multiple of 2 times less than what it would actually cost to fix it up. What that means is if it would cost you $10,000 to paint it, put new carpet in, maybe throw in a small countertop and replace the light fixtures, the property is probably discounted by a value of at least $20,000. Now you can do your market research to really figure out if this is true in your area and if this is true for this property. But this will be a generally good rule of thumb. Next, you want the property to be ideally, if not both, then at least one of them, FHA approved and VA approved. What that means is the Federal Housing Administration and the Department of Veterans Affairs have vetted this association as having strong financials and having a consistency for taking care of the building correctly. In an association, which you're always in when you're in a condo, well, I shouldn't say always, but 99% of the time, you're in an association, you're relying and you are buying into this nonprofit organization that is going to take care of the common areas and the building. Every association varies in terms of the amenities they provide and exactly what building coverages they offer. But if they're FHA and VA approved, not only does it mean that they generally take care of the building better, they have a strong history of strong financials, but they also are willing to go through the effort and hoops and hurdles to get properties FHA and VA approved, which means the properties in the neighborhood can sell to FHA and VA buyers, which means the buyer pool increases, and now the ability to resell the property and gain more equity in the long run increases, and that's your goal. You can find out whether properties are VA or FHA approved simply by Googling VA approved condos or FHA approved condos. The other thing you want to look for when you're starting and you're making your first investment is you want to find a condo that's actually going to help you take care of the building, and ideally one that's not too old. The older the building, let's say you have a 1940s condo, you're going to have more repairs that come up, and the association will be more likely to send out assessment letters saying, hey, we just had to spend $100,000 to replace the roof. Everybody's going to have to fork up $2,000 in the form of higher HOA dues. The newer the buildings are, the less likely the systems, the plumbing, the electrical, and large items have to be replaced. Fortunately, in an association, when those things have to be replaced, the cost is divided over all of the owners. In financially sound associations, the costs stay low because the association builds the appropriate reserve based on repairs that they're expecting. You could really get into a bad association and have a nightmare of a problem with the association not taking care of the building. But you can usually flush these associations out. You can do that by obviously consulting your realtor or talk to the neighbors. Go knock on doors. Hey, how do you like the association? What's up? You're always going to get people that complain and say, oh my gosh, they gave me a violation because I didn't bring my trash cans in, or I accidentally painted my door the wrong color, or I got in trouble because my railing's loose. When you hear these kind of complaints, think to yourself, who am I talking to? Oh wow, I'm talking to somebody who thinks it's okay to leave trash out and doesn't bring their trash cans in on time and doesn't maintain their property. Their house is a mess because I'm standing at the door and can look inside. Obviously, those people are not going to like the association. It's the people who are clean and tidy and follow the rules, which actually helps bring up everybody's property values, that generally like the fact that they're in an association. Again, not all associations are great, and you want to be careful anytime you're getting into any kind of association, especially since you're paying towards this nonprofit and you're essentially buying into this association. So now you're hunting down good associations, you're finding out if they're VA or FHA approved. What else should you be asking? You want to ask the following questions because they're very important for your knowledge. Does the HOA cover termite damage? Does the HOA cover the roof? Does the HOA paint the exterior of the buildings? If there is a pool, what parts of the year is the pool heated? A pool oftentimes is only really good if it actually is heated. There are some people who like cold pools, but it is a very important amenity that if there is a pool, it is at least heated for some parts of the year. Additionally, you want to ask specific questions like, who pays for building insurance on the property? Is there an earthquake policy in place for the property or a flood insurance policy in place for whatever area you're buying? Then of course you want to ask some generic questions like parking rules, parking permits, keys or openers for common areas, and you want to make sure that you find out what the history has been of dues increases. Do they regularly raise the dues for the association every year, and do they raise them 3%? Do they raise them every 2 years, and do they raise them 5%? Or have they consistently not raised the rate? Some folks think that association rates never go down, but that's actually wrong. HOAs do decrease the dues they assess if they don't need any more money. if the reserves are high enough and you're in a well-run association, I have seen dues go down, especially as you come out of a recession and more people start paying their association dues again. In a recession, dues are likely to go up because people stop making the association payment. That leaves the reserves coffer smaller and can often raise the rates on other units. So you want to keep that in mind too. Overall, you want to be in a stable neighborhood, and you can find out the history of this when you do your research on the association. How are you going to finance the deal? The nice thing about FHA-approved condos, or if you go in with conventional financing, is you could get into these with 3.5% down via an FHA loan. In fact, if you want money to rehab the property, you can even do an FHA 203K loan to finance cosmetic repairs to the condo. Generally, you're not going to do structural repairs on a condo. Additionally, you could come in with conventional financing and you could put 3 to 5% down. These are very easy loans to get. You simply call up your lender and say, hey, this is what I want. Can you qualify me for it? Usually this means you have to pay off other debts and you have to have enough financial backing to be able to qualify for the payment. I would never suggest purchase a property that you can't qualify for, obviously, because I'm all about financial soundness. Here's the next very most important part when you consider buying a condo. You need to know, what is my total payment, including principal, interest, property taxes, insurance, and the association dues? And can I rent the entire condo for more than what my payment is? Usually, you want that answer to be yes when you're putting 20% down. But I don't suggest waiting until you have 20% if you can put 10% down and buy now. I'm a very firm believer in don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate that is a good deal and then wait. So buy in the wedge of the market, see the other videos for wedge of the market and how to buy a good deal. But trying to save 0.33% on your mortgage insurance because you just don't like the concept of mortgage insurance is not a good reason not to get started on your real estate investments. This is also not your be-all end-all property. Remember, keep this in mind. You want to buy this condo to be a rental property. You are buying this property with 3.5 to 5% down or 10% down or whatever to be a rental property. So when you do those numbers and you put 20% down and the rent covers all of the payment, it should be a good deal, especially if it aligns with the condition factors we talked about, where you're not buying a property that's completely fixed up and you're paying the top dollar for the neighborhood. You do not want to be the person setting the new comps in the neighborhood. It does not give you a good margin of safety. There is a chance that if you put 5% down and then you do the math and say, well, what would my rent be on this property, that you will have a negative cash flow because you are financing an additional 10 to 15%, but you're living there, and that's understandable. But I recommend, if worst case, and I do not recommend negative cash flows, but worst case, if you get into a condo and you're only putting 3.5 or 5% down, and it would be a negative cash flow if worst case you had to rent it out, try to keep that to under $100 to $300 per month, because when you extrapolate that over a year, you're really only looking at $1,200 to $3,600 extra that it would cost you if you rented the property out. Obviously, you want to factor in property management costs, vacancy, and repairs. But that's where the beauty about starting with investing in a condo comes from. A lot of repairs, not all associations, but a lot of repairs can be covered by the association. If you don't have to worry about, and this is why you always qualify your association and check if they're making a lot of large assessments because they didn't have the money and they didn't predict these repairs. So all of a sudden your risk level actually declines because you have the HOA as a partner in helping you minimize your expenses. So you could figure that in with property management as well if worst case you had to rent this property during the first year because you lost your job or you had to move or something crazy happened. Now I suggested that the ideal property is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. The reason I said that was because if you have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, you can rent out 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. Now all of a sudden, you're living in the property. You have a roommate living with you renting 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and you're essentially house hacking, and probably now you're living in this 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo that you now own for less than what it would cost to rent the property. But now all of a sudden you're paying down principal, you're probably getting some tax benefits, and you should check with the CPA on that, especially now with how high the standard deduction is. But it doesn't matter because we're gonna turn this property into a rental property anyway, and then you'll get your tax benefits. And you're in. Once you're in, you could start developing equity and start saving money for number 2. Because guess what you're going to do next? Your next stop is buying a 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo, or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, or a 2-bedroom house, and you're gonna keep that condo. That's how you're gonna get on the investment roller coaster. Look, I'm not saying it's always gonna be up. There are going to be ups and downs. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to have problems, but you can minimize the amount of problems you have by buying an association property, a condo, in a quality association. Now you only have to deal with the interior square footage. You're usually dealing with a small amount of square footage. You don't have to deal with expensive things unshared. Oh, they just replaced the roof in 2015? Great. That's another thing I don't have to worry about. Oh, they just repainted the outside? Great. Oh, and they didn't have an assessment those 2 times? Or maybe they did and we look and see, well, how much was that assessment? There is so much data that you could look up. But know if you're getting into an FHA and VA approved condo, it's going to be very easy to resell if you needed to. You want to buy a property that you could easily rent out, which usually condos are very, very easy to rent out. And again, you're limited with the amount of maintenance you have. You're going to live there and maybe even house hack if you get that 2 and 2. Live there for a year. I don't care if you have mortgage insurance. And after a year, you're going to do it again. You're going to save up money and you're going to buy another condo or a house and the next level. And over time of you doing this, every year, few years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it takes you to make the transition, and you keep that first property as a rental, you will grow your net worth as a real estate investor. You'll be forced into investing in real estate. And who do you know? Whom do you know that bought a property 30 years ago and is upset at the value of their property? Good luck out there, folks.